Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. I'm your host, Maria Riesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Jean Laurenz, professional musician, collaborative artist, and professor. Please enjoy Jean Laurenz. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. Today, I am here with Jean Laurenz. Jean is a professional musician, collaborative artist, and professor. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to chat with you. After reading your bio, I was like, oh my gosh, you've done so many cool things and have so many creative experiences. I can't wait to hear all about it. But before we get there, if you wouldn't mind taking a couple of minutes to let our listeners know a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I'm primarily a trumpet player, and I have my training is in mostly classical music, but I've always also been very interested in storytelling and theater, and I'm also a singer. I don't claim that I'm a professionally trained singer by any means, but I do sing often, and I've incorporated it into a lot of my projects. So I take contemporary classical music and I mix it and match it with other art forms. And so that's where the collaborative artist comes in. I've performed with dancers, I've performed with visual artists, with projection art, and produced a film and produced pieces of interactive theatrical works that use music as its narrative. And so I basically really love to geek out about bringing music to the world in a way that provides multiple sensory entry points.
Yeah.
And that's how I define the collaborative artist part.
Mm-hmm.
And then I teach at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I'm the Assistant Professor of Trumpet there. So trumpet pedagogy is something else I geek out about, but the research side of what I do at the university is an arm extension of this collaborative artwork that I do.
Nice. Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing to have so many sensory experiences, visual, auditory. I imagine there's so many others that get into play there too. How cool. When did you start, or what prompted this multi-dimensional creative experience?
I think it started from a problem, which was the problem that I had in youth around the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? I never had an answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like, okay, in undergrad, I don't know what I want to do, so I'm going to do these 10 things and just keep my world open, and then I'll focus later in grad school.
Yeah.
And then in grad school, I wound up just diffracting myself even more. And then it took me about 10 years of operating in this musical art world to realize I am a patchwork artist. Like, my career is always going to be a quilted one where many parts come together to create different forms of art and different forms of musical experiences. And I think part of me, I wasn't sure if I wanted to major in theater, if I wanted to major in voice, if I wanted to major in psychology, if I wanted to major in writing or journalism or trumpet. And so this sort of crisis that I had in my youth ended up being the solution to my problems, if that makes sense.
Totally.
So I think that's where that's my origin story, is my total rejection of the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because it implies that there's a single answer that has a concrete definable description.
Yeah.
And I didn't, that's not me.
Yeah, you're not that. You are the patchwork. I love that visual
Exactly.
image of the patchwork quilt of all these pieces. I too have fingers in many pots of paint and
Mhm.
doing many,
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
things. So I can absolutely relate to that. I love it. So, well, when you think of creativity, what does it mean to you to be creative?
There's two forms of creativity that I think about.
Hmm.
There's the actual creation of something,
Hmm.
which can be very technical,
Yeah.
or it can be very natural and
Hmm.
and not involve your right brain or your left brain. Like, for example, I'm currently pregnant, and it is an extremely creative process in the truest sense of the word. Like, I am in the process of creating something without my mind.
Yeah.
Um, and I that kind of blows me away. And then there's the other branch of creativity that involves the contextual experience of unique individuals.
Mm.
And I think I heard a definition once that creativity is just the combination of two seemingly unrelated things.
Hmm.
That's it. And it's simple and pure, and it's just, I always tell my students, just smashing together two different things that don't normally go together, and bam, you're creative. Let's not make too much of a big deal about this word.
Right. Yeah. Because we can get really overwhelmed by it. Oh, I have to be creative. It can be a big pressure around it and cause a lot of stress. But to just say, no, two different things, put them together, you got something new. Here we go.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it can happen in cooking, it can happen in art. And another thing is labels are pressure cookers, right? It's
Mm.
just like going back to the
Mhm.
question of what do you want to be when you grow up. If you try
Right.
to put a label on it, it's limiting. And if you try to put a label on the identity of being a creative or being an academic or
Mm.
being intelligent, those labels are actually limiting. And
Right.
so let's not put too much of a boundary on the word creativity, and let's just say smash some things together that don't normally go together, and bam, you're creative.
Right. You got something new. That's you're creating
Yeah.
something. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the reminder of labels because I think oftentimes people get really caught up in the label of am I a creative or am I not? Do I feel creative? Do I not? I believe we're all creative in some way or another. And by having that narrative, oh, I'm not creative, that's only for those people over there, it is so limiting. And
Mhm.
so I like how you framed it as the label can be limiting.
Mhm.
For sure. Well, I imagine as a professor, as a performer, you bump into some creative challenges in your life, or maybe just, regular everyday challenges. But what are some of the creative challenges you have faced, and how do you face them?
Oh, it's so, I feel like every challenge is creative, right? Because
Yeah.
if creativity is born from context and perspective,
Mhm.
then each unique individual's response to that challenge is going to be their very own. And
Right.
so, um, I especially think when you're working with human beings,
Mhm.
there are these subtle energies at play that make you adjust in a creative way without
Mm.
even necessarily thinking about it.
Mhm.
Um, I can talk from a thing that happens every day, which is my personal practice, my skill building in trumpet.
Mhm.
And I was talking to actually Pete Kadushin, and we kind of coined the phrase practice like an engineer, perform like an artist. And I
Mm.
think I think being creative in practicing, basically practicing is problem solving, right? I
Yeah.
have these pile of things that I need to be able to play for the public, and
Mhm.
I either need to polish them up or learn them for the first time or build a new skill. And all
Hmm.
those things they're problem sets, right?
Yeah.
And I have to approach them in a variety of ways through a variety of angles.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'm approaching it more like a math problem if it's a
Hmm.
really complicated rhythm. And other times I need to be more expressive and free and let my subconscious mind lead in how I'm going to phrase something or how I'm going to express something. And I
Hmm.
think the creativity, in terms of like a practice challenge, the creativity comes into how I blend my engineering mind and my artist mind together to make the most refined yet individual and expressive product.
Mm-hmm.
And I think building your pie chart of how much to do what, because there are so many musicians who are just great technicians,
Yeah.
but they don't have that like spirit and oomph behind it. And coming from having been a public school teacher teaching K through 5 general music and then also teaching college and also working with some of the world's best professionals
Yeah.
in the creative arts, you see the expressive part of creativity, the authenticity of it
Mm-hmm.
in 5 year olds and in 6 year olds, sometimes more than in professional 46 year olds.
Right.
And so I think like not losing that shimmer of
Mhm.
the creative expressive part and
Mhm.
figuring out how to incorporate that into your product is so important for you and your authenticity.
Mhm.
And so I think finding the balance between those things is something that is a daily challenge for me.
Mhm.
Um, and then a lot of the challenges that I face in my collaborative art
Mm.
is going forth into the darkness and not knowing what the product is going to be. Like
Mm.
if I were a painter and I had a very strong ability to visualize what I wanted and the chops and the skills to back it up, then I can basically imagine what I want and do it. But in
Mhm.
the type of work that I do, because you give so much autonomy to the artists you're working with,
Mhm.
you end up really having to pivot at every step of the project
Mm.
and shift the angle and the direction of the final product based on each step. And so the pivot points are plentiful.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes they're hard. Sometimes,
Yeah.
as a director, if I'm directing a film or if I'm currently, I'm working on a piece of multisensory performance art theater that's
Uh-huh.
staged and rigged for a theatrical production in a black box theater or on a major stage.
Mhm.
Um, and when something happens where it's totally derailed from your original vision, like the problem solving and the creativity has to come in with, all right, do we take this and go in a totally new direction and redefine, or do we have to backtrack? And then
Mm.
solving that problem is, I think, a very creative one. And
Mhm.
as long as you're working with great people, the
Yeah.
product's gonna be awesome. So
Totally.
you gotta find your gut. Um,
Yeah.
and then of course just social emotional human interactions, I think,
Whew.
are infinitely creative.
Absolutely. Oh my God, I totally agree about that. But it also sounds like you have to really trust the process so deeply. Trust it to change, trust it to stay on track, trust the other people you're working with, that you're collaborating with, trust yourself. Do you feel like, I guess I'm curious, how do you trust yourself in those moments of pivoting?
I think for me, I've built trust through experience.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have the trust, and in place of that trust is fear, that's
Mm-hmm.
okay too.
Yeah,
Just,
good.
I think committing to knowing that we're gonna make a final product no matter what.
Yeah.
If you're at that commitment level,
Mm-hmm.
then something's going to happen. You're gonna
Mm-hmm.
put something into the world, and you should be proud of whatever you put out into the world because you did a thing,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I always tell my students, all you need to build a creative project are two things. You need an idea
Mm-hmm.
and a date.
Mm.
Actually, you need two things. You need an idea, a date, and a venue. And if you have your idea and you say, I want to make this happen, then I say, go out into the world,
Mm-hmm.
really think about how long it's going to take to put this together,
Mm-hmm.
even though you don't know. Find a date and find a venue
Yeah.
and book it. And then when you have that fire lit because you have that venue booked and
Mm-hmm.
people know it's happening, then you're going to have to build some sort of arc and
Mm-hmm.
some sort of project. And you or you're going to lose all your reliability.
Right.
So if you just make the deadline so firm and so non-negotiable,
Mm-hmm.
then you will have to problem solve, and whether or not you trust yourself in that process
Yeah.
doesn't matter. And then you'll build trust through the lack of trust, or through when you realize that even in holding a lot of fear instead of a lot of trust,
Mm-hmm.
through time and experience, you'll realize that actually sometimes that fear is a good thing,
Mm-hmm.
and a final product is still going to happen. And then from there, you can build trust. It's like building
Mm.
like a portfolio, like a stock
Yeah.
portfolio. You got to start with some resources,
Right.
but you can
Right.
get resources without the experience, and so etc.
Yeah. No, I love that. I like that image, like building a trust portfolio. You got to take some leaps, and it might be really scary, and that's okay. And you're going to learn something from it. And in that process of learning, you'll get to be able to trust yourself a little bit more and a little bit deeper. So,
Yeah, and there have been projects where we put a lot of time and energy into it, and the first iteration of it was kind of a bust.
uh-huh.
And I remember I was playing with this brass quintet in New York City, and we were trying to build uh, it was a program called Portraits of the Underdog, and we were trying to incorporate stories of people who have experienced adversity and
Mm-hmm.
pair it with a piece of music. Great idea. Nothing pairs better than music and storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And in our first iteration of it, it was just a total bust. We ended up doing it twice, and the second one was very successful. But the
Mm-hmm.
first one just didn't, like, nobody came. There wasn't really anything, we didn't play well. It felt kind of choppy. And I remember one of the members, we went out to eat afterwards, and one of the members looked at me and said, "Well, we did a thing." And I just thought that was such a perfect thing to say. You went out into the world, you did a thing, and you
Yeah.
should be proud of that.
Absolutely. I think that's a
Yeah.
really great reminder that even when it's a bust or it fails, you still did it, and
Hmm.
there's opportunity to do it again and refine it and make adjustments and problem solve for the next iteration of it. But you still
Hmm.
did that first one, and
Yeah.
that, don't discount it. Like, that's still important that it
Yes.
happened. Nice.
Yeah. And I actually get a lot of inspiration from the podcast How I Built This.
Ooh.
And Guy
Mm-hmm.
Raz is the host. And you hear all these stories of these people who created these ultimately very successful businesses, but you hear the little mini failures that happen along the way,
Mm-hmm.
and how in these particular creators, they just were able to zoom out and say, okay, that happened. Let's emotionally remove ourselves for
Mm.
temporarily.
Yeah.
I'm very emotionally invested, but I'm going to go into my emotional clouds, look at the bird's eye view, and say what happened and why,
Mm-hmm.
and then continue. And I think I get a lot of inspiration from those stories
Mm-hmm.
in my art, even if
Mm-hmm.
it's a very business focused podcast.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think there's so much creativity in business. Any
Oh, absolutely.
entrepreneur is the most creative human all the time.
Speaking of pivoting,
Yeah.
it's a constant pivot, especially with the landscape as it's been in the past few years.
Yeah. Absolutely. To have so many different things we're all constantly trying to catch up to or figure out. And so Yeah, there's a lot of creativity that goes into it, not just the performing arts, but yeah.
Right.
In
Yeah.
terms of, being inspired by this particular podcast, are there other things or other people that inspire you these days?
Yeah. There are general groups of people that inspire me, and then
Mhm.
there are individuals. I have a hard time answering this question for some reason, and I don't know why. I think it's because for me to be inspired by somebody, that human behind the artist has to be like the kindest, best person that I know, in
Yeah.
addition to their amazing art. There's something about, um, I I just feel like it's so important for me to love the artist as well as the human. I get it's
Mm,
not profound, but
yeah,
I have a hard time being inspired by people who I don't like really respect on a personal level, I guess. So,
sure.
I mean, one person that I'm just kind of in love with is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I just
Mhm.
absolutely love the sustained, constant focus that she had, and the fact that she was a mother, and the fact that
Mm,
she encountered adversity, and the fact that she had a targeted approach to her philosophy,
mhm,
and she played the long game. I am very inspired by her long game, and it helps me take a breath
mm,
and know that every part of my journey is a part of a longer game. Uh,
mhm,
and then there are just general categories, like any great storyteller
mm,
really inspires me. And
mhm,
especially those kinds of storytellers who can bring their storytelling and mix it with other forms of media and or art, like
mm,
film and musical theater and books that have beautiful illustrations. I'm always
mm.
geeky about great storytelling. um I follow, what's the uh oh, what is it? I'm forgetting. It's gonna come to me, but it's like a portrait of a New Yorker that they found on the street, and then they interview that New Yorker and they tell a little story about
Oh,
them.
oh, Humans of New York?
Yes, that's it. Humans of New York. I'm
Yeah.
obsessed with that because the storytelling is beautiful but potent. It's
Hmm.
not always this novel. It's a post. And then
Yeah.
there's this gorgeous photo, and
Hmm.
you really get this like feeling of the humanity that is a collective within New York City.
Hmm.
Um, and then people I work with that I'm inspired by, Maria Finkelmeyer, who helped work with me on Descended, which is an art film, and
Hmm.
then also Descended in the theatrical version. It's basically like a staged piece of theater with some choreography and storytelling and projection art, but the narrative is told through mostly music and some quotes and some
Hmm.
text. And it's all inspired by Japanese ghost stories. And it's about uh, our spiritual, supernatural selves coming together and merging with our real physical personalities. And Maria wrote the music for this piece that we're creating. And she just also has such an incredible creative mind. And
Hmm.
also, Greg Jukes is working with us on this project, and his creativity blows me away. Maria runs a company called MF Dynamics, and she's a musician slash public artist. And
Nice.
her projects are amazing. And but Greg has an ensemble called The Fourth Wall, and they combine music with circus art
Mm,
and choreography.
so fun.
And yeah, just a side note, if you want to ever interview those two people, they're amazing, so creative. Um, and so I have like some general, any mother I
Yeah.
find is so inspiring to me and creative, not
Mm,
only in the mothering process,
hmm.
the raising a toddler is such a creative process, but also the physical creation of bringing a human into this world.
Yeah.
Um, so it's
I
kind of a
love I love all of it.
janky, sort of spotted answer that is a constellation, but there are some individuals that are close to me that I'm very inspired by. There are some individuals like Ruth Bader Ginsburg that I just um, think is such an amazing human being and has left such a legacy. And then there are groups of people like mothers and storytellers and playwrights
Mm-hmm.
that I just geek out over.
I love it. Oh my gosh, it's more of your quilt. And I mean
Mhm.
the pieces, and
Exactly.
as you were talking about artists and like, being inspired by their creations, but also needing to be inspired by their people or their humanness also, it just brings up to me that integrity and the importance of integrity in the world of creativity and
Mm.
having integrity within your creative expression. And
Mhm.
yeah, just hearing as you were talking, it made me think of that.
Yeah, it's true because it goes back to authenticity. I think
Mhm.
the truest creatives and the people who are so highly skilled have connected so deeply to their authentic
Mhm.
selves, the
Yeah,
self that finds itself in the state of flow very often. And the people who kind of give me a vibe of having too much of an ego, I feel like there's a disconnection from self
hmm,
in someone who has uh, a large ego and then exhibits some not so amazing behavior because of it. To me, that's like there's an empathy there, right? Because there's a
sure,
brokenness to that.
yeah,
But I think it's hard for me to connect that to their art as
hmm.
well. Maybe it's a weird thing about me, but that's just kind of
I don't, it's not weird. I think it's normal. Like, yeah, you want someone who is authentic and shows up and does what they say they're gonna do and
right.
shares the
Yeah,
things, in that capacity. I mean, at least that's what I want in the art that I follow and am
yeah,
inspired by. So it makes sense to me.
yeah, yeah. But then there's also this understanding that no human is perfect, and in
Yeah,
a world where everything can be caught on camera, there's always something about somebody that's not going to be the beacon of
sure.
perfect human behavior. And so leaving space for humanity in
Yeah,
its best and worst parts, I think is also there. But again, you can be a jerk and be an authentic jerk and then
100%.
own it and be accountable for it. And then you're still in that good light with me.
I get it. I love it. But I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, why not? I think it's all
Own
part of it.
it.
Own it. Own the jerk. Own it.
Yeah.
Well, I imagine with all of the people that you interface with or experience creative projects with, that you come across people who may not think they are creative. How would
Mhm.
you encourage others to find creativity in their lives?
I would say, first and foremost, just go forth into the darkness. If you have an idea, if you want to do a thing,
Mm-hmm.
just just try it. Just
Mm,
just pick a date, pick a venue, and go towards it. And maybe it means if you're somebody who does not consider yourself a creative, but you want to throw a party for somebody,
mm,
dare to do something or to create something about the party that feels a little kooky and makes you feel vulnerable.
yeah.
And you're going to do it anyways because you personally would really enjoy that experience at that party. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the thing that stops us from being creative is our vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
and our insecurity that people are going to hate it.
Right.
I'll never My first big recital was in undergrad. It was my senior recital, and I was graduating with a choral music education degree and a trumpet performance degree, and I was in an a cappella group. And I wanted to put on a production. I didn't want it to be just a trumpet recital. And so I had an a cappella group there, and I conducted a choir, and I wrote my own arrangements, and I invited a dancer in to perform as I played a piece of music. And I was so scared that in this conservatory type environment, that people would just be scoffing and rolling their eyes at
Mm-hmm.
me and my kooky ideas.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I really realized afterwards when I was talking to people that this is people want. They want to be
Mm.
pulled out of their normal experience and surprised. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think people want to be surprised.
Mm. Yeah.
And people want to have that element of a deeper connection with something that they didn't know they were about to witness.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, when I spoke with the audience, the reception was just really good. And I realized that not only did people enjoy the element of surprise mixed with the vulnerability that I was willing to share,
Mm-hmm.
but my vulnerability actually brought them in deeper to the art.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think not only do people feel like you're so brave if you're willing to put yourself out there like that, but
Mm-hmm.
also they want to go with you on that journey. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you're giving a public speech or you're performing in front of people and you're nervous about it because you're scared you're going to not live up to your own expectations or people are going to judge you,
Mm-hmm.
actually, when you show a little bit of that nervous adrenaline, I think it actually pulls people in more.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look and appear nervous, it actually opens people's hearts up to you a little bit.
Yeah.
And so embrace it and allow the jitters to be there because
Mm-hmm.
that's authentic.
Yeah.
And we can all tap into empathy in
Totally.
terms of that area. Yeah.
Nice. I love it. I mean, yeah, throw the party, make it a little kooky and weird and do the thing. And I think I love that. I love that advice and those pieces. And it's been such a treat getting to chat with you. I just have one last question. What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
Mm. I definitely think that it's a state of flow.
Mm.
So I mentioned at the beginning in my practicing
Hmm.
the challenge of practicing because you're trying to be simultaneously an engineer and an artist or a problem
Hmm.
solver and a creator and an expresser.
Yeah.
And I think for me, a creative mindset is one where I'm kind of daydreamy and I'm
Mm.
just imagining projects that I want to do and I'm imagining my current project and trying to think of directions that it can take. And when there's a spark of, oh, this would be cool,
Hmm.
I write it down. And then the process of just kind of going from brainstorm to scribbling things on a piece of paper, to me, that process is magical. And it's a certain state of mind
Mm.
that I really need to give space to
Hmm.
because it often happens like if I'm warming up on the trumpet, I'm supposed to be focused, but I just go into this daydream land and then I have all these ideas and I write them down and I get really excited when that happens
Yeah.
if I can afford myself the time to do that.
Hmm.
However, immediately after that project comes the engineering part, which
Mm.
is this is the idea. It felt dreamy and flowy.
Hmm.
And the process of turning it into an actual thing in the world is one that is gritty and
Yeah.
one that is difficult and
Hmm.
challenging for me, at least.
Hmm.
So I think bringing something to fruition feels gritty and feels purposeful and feels um, simultaneously extremely exciting and extremely scary all at the same time. And the process of being in a creative mindset feels like a state of flow.
Mm. God, I love all of it. I think all these pieces you explained so well. Like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. That
Yeah, yeah,
creative experience, and then comes the like taking action and doing something with those
yeah.
creative thoughts. Yeah,
And there are so many creatives out there that actually hate the action part so much that they don't do it.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And or like when I was in my 20s, I was debilitated by all these ideas I had,
Yeah.
and I wasn't able to pick one of them, so I didn't do any of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like I like to actually tell my students to have a loose piece of paper and just write down all of your ideas, every single one, good, bad, whatever. Um, Go away from it, leave it for a week, come back and look at it and just circle 3 of the things that stick out to you the most in terms of creative excitement.
Yeah.
And then go away for a week and come back. And out of those 3, pick, write down action steps that you can take towards making that thing happen. And whichever one has the most actionable steps, do that one.
Yeah.
Because it's a definable process that isn't debilitating, and it allows the proper space and time to let your creative ideas be jotted down. It gives them space to kind of sit in your subconscious, and then when you come back, you think about which ones are still standing out to you, and then when you come back again, you're like, okay, which one do I actually feel I can turn into little SMART goals? And that if you can create 5 SMART goals around an idea, then you are on your way, and you can do
run with it.
Yeah.
Go with it.
Take that baton.
Exactly. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, thank you so much for kind of breaking that down for listeners. I think that's fantastic. And thank you for taking the time to talk with me. If people want to learn more about the projects that you're working on or things that you're doing, how could they go about doing that?
You can go to my website, jeanlaurenz.com. A whole tab for Descended that explains what the project is. You can watch the film for free.
Nice.
It's a 27-minute art film, and it's it begs you to go deep inside yourself and define what is the difference between your real physical mind and space and your supernatural self. And then, you can find everything there. You can also find just like current happenings on social media. I'm on primarily Instagram, but also Facebook and kind of on TikTok, but not active. I have some dog videos on TikTok. At Jean Laurenz is my Instagram handle.
Great. I'll put those in show notes so people have easy access to find you. And thank you again for taking the time to chat with me. It's been such a treat.
Sure. Thank you for having me. It was so fun.
Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.